The Nikon Z8 is the best Nikon camera I have ever used. I've used it extensively since it was launched, and today I want to share with you 5 custom features that will make sure that you always get the shot. Hello, my name is Shem Compion. I'm the Managing Director of C4 Photo Safaris, and with a camera as my passport, I have traveled the globe, yet Africa remains my muse. And today, I want to share with you 5 custom functions of the Nikon Z8 that I have been using over the last 3 years since this camera was launched. I've got extensive field experience using it for photographing wildlife, travel and landscapes throughout Africa. And so that's what we're going to delve in today. It's an unusual position for me because I'm normally out in the field presenting these videos with a camera as my tool. But today we're in the studio. I'm going to bring it up and show you all the little secrets that make sure that you get great shots in the field and you never miss a photograph. That's the most important part. We want the camera to work as a tool for you in order that you get the photos that you require in every different scenario. So join me and here we go. When the Z9 came out, I bought it immediately and I loved the Z9. I thought it was the greatest camera ever, but I always knew the Z8 was coming. And as soon as it was released, I traded in the Z9 and got the Z8. The critical element here is that a lot of the attributes on the Z8 go to the Z9 and to the other Z cameras in this generation of Nikon cameras. So what I talk about here might not only be specific to the Z8. I'm using the Z8 as the tool today, yet it's applicable to the Z9 and the other cameras. And so the first one I want to talk about is pre-capture. It came out with the Z9, also included in the Z8. And what pre-capture is when you set it up, it buffers the information as you're looking through a viewfinder. And when you push the shutter button to take the photograph, it takes a sequence and a series of photographs for 1 second prior to you taking the picture. What that means is that it has transformed birds in flight photography, especially small birds that take off incredibly quickly. Our reaction time has no chance to get the birds taking off in flight. And who can remember the amount of times we've all spent waiting for a bird to take off to try and get it in flight, and of course it disappears and you get a stick or you get a tail of a bird. So pre-capture has transformed that, and to set it up correctly means that you improve your chances of getting birds in flight exponentially. It actually makes it child's play and it feels like cheating in certain ways. The first thing we do is we go into the menus and we go to custom settings menu, shooting display and pre-release capture options, and that's D3. We go in here to pre-release burst, and under pre-release burst, the default is going to be none, set it to 0.3. Like I said, small birds take off incredibly quickly. Our reaction time is around about 0.25 of a second, so 0.3 sits in our favor there. And then we go down to post-release burst and set it to max. We want it to go for as many frames per second as possible. Then it's a straightforward setup that you set it like that and you leave it, you never touch it again. So when you're out in the field and you're out photographing, all you need to do is push on the top left of your camera the drive button. It reveals the release modes, and with 2 clicks at the bottom with your thumb on the rotating drive up to 30. And that immediately puts it into pre-capture. 30 will take 30 frames, 60 will take 60 frames, and 120 will take 120 frames. Importantly, when you look through the viewfinder again, you'll see on the top right that it says PRE. So of course, once you take those photographs, you then go back into your drive mode on the top and you cycle back down to whatever frames per second you were previously. I like to live on 5 frames per second. So what that means is that when you're in the field, you're driving around, you might be photographing different wildlife subjects as you move through the field, and then you see a good opportunity of a bird on a twig, bee eaters that are returning to the same perch, hawking for insects. And so you can focus on that perch, focus on the bee eater, and as it takes off, your pre-capture captures the whole sequence of that bird taking off. Very important to note that in this camera and the Z9, it records it as a large JPEG. So it's the largest file JPEG that you can get, not yet RAW. Hopefully, Nikon, if you're listening, please, the next software upgrade, let's get those into RAW files, please. However, my catalog and portfolio of birds in flight on takeoff has now grown exponentially. And in one afternoon, you can have so much fun capturing birds in flight that 2 years ago, impossible. The second tip, FX DX mode and the ability to cycle very quickly between them. I'm a photographer who really likes to see what I'm photographing when I'm looking through the lens. And so when I'm in FX, that's great. And I've got my 600mm lens on with the bird. But if I want to get closer, I want to see how close I'm getting. And so being able to flick between FX and DX, which is a 1.5 crop, really helps me to envisage the image as I'm seeing it. Very simple solution. And today we're going to spend a lot of time in the custom control menu. So this is a two-phased approach. First, we want to determine which image areas we want to be able to use and cycle through. So we go to the custom settings menu, we go to display, and we go to limit the selectable image area. And you'll see I've already selected only FX and DX. I've got no concern with 1:1 or 16:9. So I'll leave those ones off. Then press done, and I go into the controls menu, F, and I go to 2, and I go to the bottom button over there. Very easy for my finger to maneuver into that one. And in that selection, I select the FX mode there. So now, when I'm photographing, and my finger is, and I want to change into DX, I just am able to use my finger in the front of the camera and use my thumb on the dial to flick between only these two. There's no option of 1:1 or 16:9, which would add confusion to the whole scenario. So here, I'm just being able to maneuver between them. Of course, I live in FX because I want the most pixels out of my frame. But DX, when you need it, allows you to crop in tight and envisage the composition that you want. I use it for creative ability. Yes, I do lose some pixels on the side. I still get around about a 20 megapixel file. So I'm quite happy with that. But I love seeing what I want to photograph. And if I have to use it, so be it. Another very good application for it is when I'm working and photographing with people and I'm photographing in a candid moment, I can switch my camera into DX mode and be a little bit further away from my subjects. It gives us more sense of relaxedness. It doesn't impose me on the situation, and I get the photographs that I want. The third one, we've all done it. We photograph in the afternoon, we have a great session, we go to bed happy, we have a nice meal, and we forget about deleting the photographs off your memory card. So the next morning we wake up and we're about to start photographing out in the field, and your memory card is 3/4 full. And you think to yourself, what have I just done? I've only got a few images left. The action is happening in front of me. I need to find space. Am I going to go rummage in my bag to find the memory card down there? Or do I find one from a friend of mine that's working with me? Here is the solution. A very quick solution that you can use to just get rid of a few photographs on your memory card. I'll show you exactly where to find it. Here we go to the playback menu. And right at the top is the delete button. Of course, we don't want to delete all, which would be that one there. We go into the delete button, and here we can do two options. We can select pictures, and we can do a very quick select of the actual images themselves. This is a touch screen, so as I'm touching them, I can select. So you can now do multiple selections, scroll through your photographs, and do quick delete selections. That is very, very handy because you can select the ones that you don't want. However, you can also go to pictures shot on selected dates, and it will bring up date folders of all your images. Now, if you have downloaded those photographs, you know they're safe. That's very handy for you. And then you can select the ones that you want. You can check them with tapping by your finger, and you can clean out your memory cards. So those are two very quick ways to delete your images off your memory card and ensure that you are able to continue photographing as much as you require. With the advent of these great mirrorless cameras, has been the advent of incredible autofocus. And aligned to that, in parallel, is also functionality and customization of autofocus. So when you're out photographing, the real challenge is almost what autofocus mode to use. And in this special tip here, I'm going to show you how you can very quickly change between two autofocus modes simply by moving your thumb that much. So I use the autofocus on button at the base of the camera here. That's one that's used by many people, especially if you are photographing in back button focus. So the customization can be for the AF on button, or like I'm going to discuss, the display button. Those are the two that I cycle between. If you use your front finger and the shutter release button to autofocus, remember that you can then customize and dictate which button you want your specialization to be on. So to set this up, we're going to go into custom settings menu, to controls, and we're going to go to F2, which is custom controls shooting. And in this instance here, we know that the AF on button is our button that we're going to use for most of our photography. What I want to show you is a very handy one, is now going to the display button, which is this button over here. And in the display button, you can go to recall shooting functions, which essentially allows you to pre-program any type of setting onto this button. What I've done is I've set it to be in manual mode, a shutter speed of 1/80th of a second, an aperture of f8, no compensation, normal metering, and I have normal standard focus tracking, and I also have the ISO sensitivity is free to float. So what it allows me to do from the setting is that when I move to the display button function at 1/80th of a second, I've set it so that if I see any animal that is running sideways, I can pan with that animal to get a motion blur photograph. So I've preset it personally to be in a 1/80th of a second in order to get motion blur from panning animal movements. However, you can deselect any of these and let it go into any type of mode, and you can focus on the actual physical AF area mode. So, for instance, you could set your AF subject detection option on in this section, and so that when you're in your AF on button here, you don't have it on. And if you see a scenario where you want to use your eye tracking and animal tracking, you move your thumb simply to the left onto the display button, and that then will activate the eye tracking focus. So you can customize these to specifically to your requirements. Remember, if you're using the shutter button up front, then these two are totally customizable. Now, the problem with this is that the display button is really handy for when you're looking through your viewfinder and looking at the back of the camera to see what types of displays you have. As we know, in the displays you have all sorts of histograms, levels, and so on. So what I did is I changed the button of the function 3 button, as you can see there top left, to be the display button. So I then use that button to cycle through when I want to see the different screens on the monitor at the back of the camera. So now, in a future video, I'm going to do a deep dive into autofocus on the Z8. For now though, I want to give you the basics of how to set up some really nice tips and functions for your autofocus modes. Let's get into it. So firstly, we want to customize the focus points that we use when we're photographing. We're going to custom setting menus, focus, and then to limit the autofocus area mode selection. And I do this because there are so many options as we cycle through here. There's way too many. And so I only want to use ones that are going to be relevant to me. I love single point AF for photographing through leaves at a subject behind them. Pinpoint AF, even better. And then the various dynamic ones. And I've deselect the ones I do not want and select the ones I do have. So that's the first part of selecting the autofocus points that you want. And I always say, in this instance, less is more. You don't want to be overwhelmed with selections when there's a fast moving scenario in front of you. You want to have the right setting in front of you. Then I'm going to go to my controls button. And from the controls, again, back into the shooting, F2. And here, I'm going to, on the top button, as we can see, there's the bottom one, which we've already set up for FX/DX. On the top one, again, this is very customizable, so you can have it to any other button, but I like to have my hands controlling the tools that I want without having to look up or adjust by taking my hands off the camera. And I select into this one that I can now cycle the autofocus area mode. And here they all are listed exactly as we had. So that means that when I'm out photographing, I simply push that button and it cycles through the different ones. As I keep pushing it, it changes the autofocus modes. So what that means is that now by pushing this button once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, I cycle through the various autofocus modes that I require. 3D tracking, the pinpoint one that pushes through any leaves. I love these ones for just general wildlife photography. And of course, this one for large groups, birds flying, where it captures a large group. Then there's one last addition to this, and this is the real magic of customization with autofocus. And that is being able to expand and control the size of your large group autofocus window. For photographing birds in flight, up against the sky, and large groups of animals, it is indispensable. And once you use it, you just can't go back. It's really, really a great feature. So have a look at this. We're back in the custom settings menu and back to F controls and on the shooting. And you dig into it here and you select your focus mode AF area mode. So what it allows you to do once you select that is that when you're in photographing with your group focus mode, you push that button in, you click it once on the dial in the top right of the camera, and then by using the up and down on the joystick of the camera, you can customize this button and customize the group area size of your camera without your hands physically leaving the camera. You have this beautifully customizable. I'm going up to make it larger, down to make it smaller, and sideways to make it whatever size I want to from left and right. And that really helps you from a customization autofocus point of view, determined by your subject in the field when you're out working. So that's really the most important aspect of this. Now you've got Shem's 5 special tips for customizing your Nikon Z8 and your other Nikon cameras that you've got. Remember, every button is customizable. So once you're in that F2 menu, you can select and choose the buttons that suit you the most. What I really like about this is that once you've got this set up, you are so ready to go. Your hands don't need to leave the camera. You can always have your eye on the viewfinder. And the more you use it, the more second nature it becomes, and your photography just improves all the time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.